Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. As always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Mason. Rick, before we get on to any sports topics, I got to go on my old man rant for just a minute. So we have kids in a family at the end of our street. Our end of our street is a cul-de-sac, and they live at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Uh-oh.
And one of them decides he's going to rev his little sports car down the street the other day, going about 50 miles an hour. So last night I'm home. I'm sitting outside for a little bit before the rains came, and I hear the motorbike roaring down the street about 2 or 3 times. And finally I just said, enough of this. So I walk out to my driveway. As he comes roaring back the other way, I just yelled, slow down, to which he looked at me like he was going to shoot me in the face. So it felt like a Gran Torino moment for me. So I'm kind of waiting for the rumble to start, to be honest with you.
So do you think – so wait, this was yesterday you said that this happened or the day before?
No, yesterday.
Okay,
Wednesday.
so there hasn't been any time yet for him to follow up here. Are you expecting him to come by today on the motorbike? You think he's going to show up at the doorstep?
Well, I will say this. After I yelled at him, the motorbike didn't go down the street again, so I will say that.
Okay.
I mean,
so you won.
We have little kids that wander around. We have pets that wander around. I don't need Junior riding 50 miles an hour down a residential street with a cul-de-sac on it.
In your mind at the time, were you doing it for little kids and for puppies, or were you doing it because he was annoying you with the noise of the motorbike?
Mostly because he was annoying me with the noise of the motorbike. I'm not going to lie to you. But that being said, if he continues to do it, the next thing that will go is a brick will be thrown at his wheel, and we'll see how he handles that when he goes tumbling over the handlebars.
Oh, I love it. Starting off the podcast strong. Oh, it's funny because I did a podcast on I guess it was last week, Friday of last week. I had gone to meet Jim Kelch, my broadcast partner on the NKU games, for lunch over at Fort Wright Family Restaurant. As I'm coming up Highland Avenue there, I admittedly, I was late to lunch, so I was in a rush. I wasn't really paying a lot of attention, and I started riding a guy's ass. I mean, I was right up on him. It was totally my fault. He brake checked me, to which I stopped my car, gave him the wave, was like, my fault, totally on me. Put my head down, was like, that's my bad, right? This guy proceeds to stop his car there in the middle of Highland Avenue. We're not at the light. We're just in the middle of it, right there on the overpass above 75 North. And he stops right there, looks back at me, and is flipping me off. And I just wave again, like, sorry, that was me. I get it. I screwed up. I was riding your ass. And then he opens his car door up, turns around and says, I'm going to shoot you, MFer. And this guy's 70, maybe probably older, in his 70s, fat, bald. He's got another old man in his passenger seat. And so at this point, I'm like, Jesus. So you can't be too safe in 2024. So I just drive around him, go to the stoplight, to which he pulls up behind me. And in his windshield, he's still making gun motions with his finger and thumb. Lord. Yeah. So at that point, I'm looking at the passenger next to him, and I'm thinking, are these two old dudes just bored on a Friday afternoon and just messing with me at this point, or are they being serious? But either way, great road rage moment. Sorry to derail the podcast here to start, but once you said that, I had to do the selfish thing and follow up with my story.
One last point. When I had that happen to me, where I've done that and got mad at somebody, if they give me the wave, like, my bad, I'm like, okay, we're all good. I'm not going to carry this any further.
To me, that's the universal thing that we're all looking for there, right? It's like, you screwed up and I just want you to acknowledge it. And in this case, I had screwed up and I was like, totally on me. I'll stop. I'll accept any, whatever you want to do. Flip me off, yell at me. That's fine. But then, like, going on to like, I'm going to shoot you, MFer. It's not like I had been aggressive back to him. I was like, yeah, I screwed up. Sorry. Anyway, the Reds, Skinny, the Reds.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of car wrecks.
Speaking of car wrecks, the Reds are in the midst of a 7-game losing streak as we record this on Thursday morning. That's their worst skid since 2022. They've lost 10 of their last 12. They're currently at 16-20, tied with the Pirates for third in the NL Central, 5 games back of the Brewers in first place. They'll wrap up their 3-game series against the Diamondbacks today here in a few hours, recording this just before noon. And then they're off to the West Coast for a 10-game road swing in San Fran, Arizona, and L.A. We'll get to the struggles, the 7-game losing streak, the offensive futility here in a second. But Skinny, first of all, the news of the week, what the hell is going on with Christian Encarnacion Strand? I don't understand this at all.
I don't either. I mean, there's obviously something affecting him. I mean, this guy is just, I know he doesn't have a proven deep major league track record, but he's proven he's going to hit at every level. And he proved it at points last year, especially that last month. He was hitting like a world. Something obviously has got to be wrong with that injury situation. And maybe this is just a chance to get it right, whatever that might be. I don't even saw. And I'm like, whoa, that window's crazy to me. But yeah, I think it's probably the right thing to do. I mean, I know some people thought about, would it be best to demote him perhaps, and maybe that will get him right. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's going to help anybody. I think he's a Major League Baseball player, period, end of story. He was dealing with an injury, but it is weird.
But Skinny, just the injury thing, it's like the Reds announced on Wednesday that they had signed Mike Ford to the big league contract, and they're placing CES on the injured list with a fracture in his wrist. But then they're like, it's not from when he got hit by the pitch in that game. It was from a previously fractured wrist. We let him come back after sitting out for 4 games, and now it's the fractures. And I just don't understand how the timeline adds up at all. And by the way, everyone was bitching at them a week and a half ago saying, why aren't you putting him on the injured list and going through this week plus with a weak bench, a handicapped bench? Why wouldn't you just put him on the injured list? And like, well, because he's going to be back in 7 days or whatever it is, instead of having to keep him out for a week and a half. Well, now he's going to be out for over a month. What the hell is going on with their diagnosis of these injuries?
Well, the initial thing was it was a healed fracture, and it was a matter of pain tolerance. And maybe he told them, I'll grit my way through this, I'll be fine. And then he wasn't. And I think that's where this was, is sometimes you take the player at his word until you see proof in the pudding, and then the player finally admits, I'm not right at this moment. And so I think that was part of the timeline of this, to be honest with you.
It just seems like there's been too much, and it's not all fair to say like they're misdiagnosing injuries or all of them have played out like this, but the amount of misinformation and confusing situations around Reds injuries over the last year, it's growing quickly, Skinny. I mean, at some point, it's like, what's going on here?
They do tend to play more shorthanded than most teams, it feels like.
Well, David Bell gives you these weird answers to things, and then it like turns out to be completely incorrect. It's like, again, I don't expect you to tell us the truth on every injury situation, but why are you telling us things that are blatantly wrong and putting yourself at a disadvantage over it?
By the way, I don't know if you heard David Bell post game yesterday. I think he went to the Wes Miller School of press conferences when things are not going well. We're getting close. Close to what, dude? Chopping one out of the infield? What are you getting cllose to, bro?
Yeah, close to getting a hit is what he meant to say.
Yeah.
Scoring a run finally. They did hold a lead for half of an inning there.
They did.
One point in that progress. Game, Wednesday night.
Yeah, it's disappointing. This is the growing process when you're trying to grow with younger guys, and part of it is marginal older guys, and you have kind of a weird roster of not a lot of proven guys, and that's the unfortunate. And one of the proven guys, Jeimer Candelario, hasn't hit this year, so there's that concept of it. So you're in a weird spot, and I know nobody wants to hear this. I get it. You want immediate results, not just you, the general populace. It literally is a work in progress, and you just have to roll with it. It sucks. There's no clear-cut answer for this. There's no real answers in the minors at the moment either. That was what made last year so exciting, is there looked like there were answers in the minors. And then those answers came to fruition. Well, now 2 of those answers, one suspended, one still hurt McLean. Now technically a third is hurt in Encarnacion Strand. And so those answers have quickly gone away to the point where, you've got a bunch of guys who just aren't very good.
The negativity with the fan base is extremely high right now, and understandably so with the 7-game losing skid and the lack of offense during that stretch. But in your opinion, is it too early to start hitting the panic button around this team?
Yeah, because there's really nothing you can do about it. This is what happens when you're trying to build with young guys. There will be steps backward. And unfortunately, again, you're without what is literally 3/9 of your starting lineup. Your projected starting lineup is out in Encarnacion Strand, McLean, and Marte. And the bottom line is you just got one of your starters back in TJ Friedel. So technically you've been without at times 4/9 of your starting lineup this year. And that, give me another team in baseball that can deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the only reason now, that's a big part of this season. And I am starting to feel like, because of the injuries, I mean, as soon as McLean went down, my feelings about this season went from pretty high to pretty negative and pessimistic all of a sudden, because I felt so high on McLean and what he meant to this team and what that would mean with him being out for the entire year. But I guess the only thing that's keeping me from completely panicking and saying this season is completely getting away from these guys is the pitching is still pretty damn good, Skinny. The starting pitchers have an ERA of 3.11 during this losing streak. And I mean, that's not what we expected coming into the season. We thought the offense might be able to carry on. The pitching might not be there yet. In fact, it's been the exact opposite to this point. So I guess that's the only reason I still have some confidence, is that maybe if some guys can get a little bit healthy, maybe if TJ Friedel starts setting the table at the top of the order, maybe then you can get the offense going a little bit to complement the pitching, and it's not all for naught. I mean, it's not like you're 10-26 right now. You are 16-20. It's not good, but it's not over yet.
Yeah, I think the positive is the step forward that the pitching staff has taken. And now, and again, no one wants to hear this. It may not even come this year. It may be next year. And I hate to do that and kick the can that far down the road. But eventually, when you marry some of these guys who you really believe in as position players that are going to hit when they're healthy, with the pitching staff taking a step forward. Now, you could argue that, well, next year, maybe the pitching staff takes a step backwards because Lodolo gets hurt again and Hunter Green gets – you can't control those things. I get that it's frustrating, but you really can't. And while you'd love to have more major league ready prospects, you brought your major league ready prospects up. We've gone through that already. Can you argue go make a trade or two? Maybe. But again, are you going to have to then give up some prospects that you're still counting on in the minors that are pitching prospects, or a Cam Collier that's a Class A prospect at the moment? Are you willing to deal those for short term, maybe being in a race? And so I know now people are going to relitigate, well, you were in it last year and you didn't do anything, and how many times are you going to piss that stuff away? I get it. But I also get what they're trying to do, and unfortunately, it just hasn't married up. You can point the finger at anybody you want to point to. That's your prerogative. But again, I'm not sure what they can do about it at the moment.
The one thing you said that I totally agree with, I think is worth pointing out this year, is there is no help on the way at AAA.
Right.
And that's a major difference from last year. It's like, okay, wait, they've still got these reserves. They've kind of got these bullets they can fire still when things aren't going well. Maybe this guy down there will give them a little more pop, or maybe he'll spark the offense. They don't have that this year, and that's one of the concerning parts. You mentioned, people wanting to point the finger, and I would agree that it's not on any one guy, and certainly one at bat doesn't lead to a losing skid like this or the struggles they've had at the plate. But moments like this current stretch they're in, this is when Jonathan India needs to step up. This is what he's still on the team for. And that opportunity he had in the bottom of the ninth last night, when they've got two men on, the other team's scuffling, the pitcher's got a little panic, he's got a tight sphincter. I mean, that's the moment. If you're Jonathan India and you're there because of your bat and you're there because of your leadership and you're one of those rah-rah clubhouse guys, to me, that's a big moment to miss on. I understand it's one single at bat and he hit it to the warning track, but he hasn't come up with any of those moments so far this year. And that's why he's still on the roster, in my opinion.
And I agree with them keeping him even when there was an initial glut of infielders at the point of, my gosh, they got too many. And obviously they now don't have enough. When Santiago Espinal starts a lot, you don't have enough. But I understood why they kept him around. There was places you could play him, things he could do, the leadership portion of it. But now when other guys start to come back and he gets shoved out of a position, then he becomes expendable. And that's just, this is your opportunity, man. They gave it back to you. Injuries gave it back to you. Former rookie of the year who kind of been phased out, but is here maybe because of leadership and not much more. You've gotten your opportunity again, and quite frankly, you failed at it.
Yeah, that's it right there. I mean,
it wasn't just last night. It's been almost since Jump Street.
Yeah, exactly. Last night was kind of just a microcosm of what we've seen to this point. But you're right. The real key here is he's been given this second chance opportunity to get a starting spot again and kind of re-establish himself as a mainstay in this lineup. And he's completely floundered in that opportunity. So at this point, it's kind of hard to defend the guy the way we have maybe the last year plus, as people have wanted the Reds to get rid of him.
And frankly, Ricky's going to have 6 to 8 more weeks probably to still give a chance to prove himself. And maybe he does. I hope he does, because I do think he has some value to this club. But you're not going to have value when you're batting 210 and not coming through. And look, you don't have to come through in every clutch spot. But it's funny you say, I'm watching the game last night, and when he came up, I said, "Here's your opportunity, man. Cash in on it." He didn't. I know he did it okay, but he still didn't cash in on the opportunity. It
felt like the moment was there, and for everyone. For him, it was a turnaround moment. For the team, it was a turnaround feel-good moment. And the stage was set perfectly.
Yep.
That pitcher was really struggling. It's like, come on, man, just get a slap single into right field, and everything feels different all of a sudden. And unfortunately for him and the team, he couldn't do it. I'll wrap up the Red segment with this, Skinny. This 10-game West Coast road trip could be the end of the season for the Reds. This could be it right here.
It could be. I mean, they're only 5 back at the moment, despite what they're going through. It's not going to be a division that's going to have a 95-game winner in it. Hell, it might not even be a division with a 90-game winner in it. So it's not the sky is not falling completely at the moment. But yeah, you go out west and go 1-9, 2-8, and you lose another 3, 4, 5 games, and you're 10 back in late May. That's a tough one to overcome.
Yeah. And I mean, let's think about what they're doing right here. We've talked about how the West Coast can be difficult for a team making this trip out there, but they're also doing it with no off day, right? So no off day, then 10 road games in a row. I mean, that's not going to be an easy stretch for this team. So definitely could be a telling trip coming up for this team as we go along over the next week. Plus, we'll talk about that. Anything else on the Red Skinny before we switch gears here to the Bengals?
Yeah, no, I again, I thought at the very least you could split the 6-game homestand here between the Orioles and Diamondbacks and still kind of be okay. But it feels like it's Groundhog Day every night, and to the point of I don't need to hear that we're close, David Bell. I know what that is. That's a guy grasping at straws, trying to keep the confidence level up, much like I think Wes Miller at the time he said it. That's what he was trying to do was keep his guys in it and believing in them. And I understand all of that, but I don't need to hear we're close. I mean, no, this isn't horseshoes or hand grenades. We're not close. This isn't, the work in progress at the moment. This is, you better go win a ball game here at some point.
Yeah. He's got to learn the college basketball lingo though. It's not we're close. It's we're coming.
I'm sorry. We're coming. You're right. We're coming.
You got to go with that.
Yeah.
That's more effective that way.
Yeah, we're coming.
That's the dating early. All right. Let's switch gears here to the Bengals, where the big news of the week, Skinny, Joe Burrow with his backwards hat and his compression arm on his right throwing elbow was out there throwing in front of media cameras and the Bengals media people. He's 5 months out from his wrist surgery. The original recovery timeline was 4 to 6 months. And on Monday, we got to see that video of him throwing, spinning around, showing off his hat. Then we got a comment from every receiver that he threw to saying how great his velocity was and how he's better than ever. So my question for you is, should fans read into those comments? Should it make us feel better about things with Joe Burrow right now?
No, but it should at least give you the some assurance of he's making progress. And I think that's all you were looking for at this point in the comeback. What was it, about a month or so ago at a function, he said, I think I'll start throwing in May. Well, here he is. He actually started throwing in April. He said he started throwing about a month ago, but here he is throwing for his teammates and for us in May. So he's on that timeline. Again, he's not been hit yet. He hasn't had to brace a fall with that wrist yet. We're not going to probably see any of that unless it's bad luck in a camp practice. You're not going to see that till the regular season. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a positive step forward, but it's still not the end game. And he knows it. He talked pretty openly about this is the toughest injury he's ever been through. This is a guy who had his knee ripped apart, right? and have it reconstructed. And he's talking about this is the toughest injury he's ever had to go through. I will say this, Rick, and I wrote it, and I wrote it yesterday, I guess, no, day before you. I wrote it Tuesday after the press conference, and Paul Daner kind of followed up on it in The Athletic today, and I think we both had the same takeaway. I thought it was really important for him to finally come to the conclusion of, I have to start listening to my body. When something hurts, something aches, I have to not practice that day. I have to not push it that day. I think it's a guy who's finally learned his lesson of, I probably did too much. And listen, there's part of that you admire, right? Of a guy just saying, to hell with it. I'm trying to do my best for my team, and I'm going to fight through this. Well, he probably came back too early from the appendectomy, and he came back too early from the calf, and then he kept pushing it and hurt the calf again. And again, I get it. We didn't have a proven Jake Browning at that point. And I do understand he's trying to be the tough guy. And there is an admiration. But at some point, when your body's telling you, and I even wrote this too, and again, I wrote it as a column, so it's my opinion. I mean, we still don't know the full story of, was the wrist even injured? What was the thing on the wrist that day before Baltimore? Maybe it was just the craziest coincidence known to mankind, but maybe there was something to it. And yeah, Jadeveon Clowney did land on him, and that caught, but maybe, it was already on its way to doing that, and that was just the final straw to do it. And that's what caused it. And so I thought that was really important to hear. Now, whether he follows through with that or not, only time will tell. But for him to kind of admit that, I think showed a little bit of growth and maturation.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of funny. I had pointed that out too in my notes here, because you hear him talking about that and it's like, oh yeah, that's good. It is a guy who's really getting it. Then at the same time, I start thinking about what we're really talking about here. And it's like, well, I mean, for the most part, he's felt fine, right? Like, this is a guy who's done the rehab. He's gone through the process, and then he's like doing the work that he expects to do, which is his job. It's like kind of a hard thing to say, I need breaks from my job, or I'm going to take days off from my job when I don't feel like I need them necessarily. And so, I mean, I guess, obviously if he has pain, if he has setbacks, it's going to be clear to him, hey, I need a day off here, or I need a day off there. But I wonder how much he can really do the load management stuff if he's not in pain, if he's not hurting, and if it's just a matter of.
I think you go back to last year, that second day of practice, when all of us literally who cover the team were sitting there going, that's odd, him wearing a compression sleeve on his calf. He's never done that before. And then lo and behold, that practice, he gets hurts the calf. There was something wrong with him going into that day, right. Whether it was minor to whatever degree it was, there was something that was bothering him in that calf that day. That to me is, I think, the learning of, hey, if it's something like that, I'm not pushing it. It's just not worth it.
That makes sense to me. And I just wonder, is this going to become a thing we have to monitor where it's like,
so.
Joe has thrown 8 straight days in training camp, so everyone has to ask questions to him afterwards that day of training camp. Like, Joe, do you need a break? Are you ready? Are you tired? Does your arm hurt? How's your wrist feel? All of that. There was one other interesting moment during the press conference where you mentioned he's being open about all this stuff. He's talking about the process of rehabbing, comparing it to the other injuries he's had. Then someone asked him about, does the wrist hurt at all when you throw? And he goes, I'll keep that to myself. Yeah. But anytime you have an injury there, you're going to feel it or whatever. What was that? I mean, like, that concerned me a little bit because all of a sudden, like, he got secretive about it hurting when he throws.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is it probably does still hurt, right? I mean, you're coming back from an injury. There's probably some pain to it at times. And so if you answer it, and I understand your point because it raises alarm bells initially, but I think I'm not going to try to explain that it hurts this much or it hurts that much or it's just too much for me to go into. I'm just not going to answer that question. So I fully understood his answer to that as well.
Yeah, I took it the same way you did. Is I'm trying to avoid all the follow-up questions that are going to come from you guys if I start getting into the details of exactly how the pain feels when I'm doing certain things. That's the way I took it. But I will say, after he's answering all these other questions very openly, for him to clam up when that question came up and be like, oh, I'm not going to talk about that, was like, wait, is there something there? Is there something we should know about?
I'm just glad we didn't get that. Is it 80%, 90%? No, I talked to my doctor today. It's 62.7%. I mean, that's always my, is it, what, can you put a percentage on it? Yeah, it's 53.749% good.
Yeah, I always get that. Like, even with people always ask me, what's the chance that this player commits to Xavier? It's like 100 or 0? I don't know. Like, I'm not good at math. I don't know probabilities well enough to do those types of things.
He's 91.2% to commit until the other school gives him more NIL money.
Right, exactly. That's a tough thing to decipher. So if that's the only thing he was doing there, I completely get it from that standpoint. Just thought it was a weird moment in that press conference is all. Another thing here, Paul Dehner and Mo Egger were doing their run, pass, or boot segment on Paul Dehner's podcast. They're going down each position group and assigning run, pass, or boot to the 2022, 2023, or 2024 version of those groups. And we're not going to rehash their whole segment that they did, obviously, but it did make me want to get your take on a few position groups and whether or not the Bengals have improved since last year, because listening to their conversations, it did bring up a couple of questions, in my opinion. So we'll start with running back. Are the Bengals better at running back this year than they were last year?
I think they're different enough to say yes, because I think they have a chance to be more explosive. You know what you had in Joe Mixon. It's an aging Joe Mixon. It was a Joe Mixon that didn't make people miss. It was a Joe Mixon that didn't have explosive plays. It was a Joe Mixon that would get you 2 yards when 2 yards were there. As Brian Callahan famously said, and that quote certainly aged perfectly as the year went along, we get what's blocked and not much more. He didn't break tackles. And I'm not here to piss on Joe Mixon. I promise I'm not. Listen, I do think, though, it's just the lifespan of a running back. At some point, you just stop being a dude, and the bumps and bruises and bangs and all that add up. I think you have a potential to be far more explosive. I can't tell you I know that they're going to be more efficient. I think they will be, because I do think with the possibility of more explosiveness, the teams were more than willing to let the Bengals run on them last year, and they just didn't. They couldn't. Joe Mixon ran into more light boxes than any running back in the NFL. If you have light boxes with Chase Brown and Zach Moss, and they make a guy miss in that box, they're turning 6 yards into 25, 30, 40-yard gains. Not regularly, but enough to go, can't do this anymore. Well, we have to, because we got these guys on the outside we got to cover. I think the explosive part of the backfield is what makes them, in a roundabout way to answer your question, better, just because of what defenses are going to have to do to that potential explosiveness.
And does that make more sense for an offense like the Bengals with Joe Burrow, since they don't want to rely on running the ball in short yardage that much anyways? Is it more advantageous for them to have the big play back as opposed to the short yardage guaranteed to get 1 or 2 yards back?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I mean, I think in old school I formation, Joe Mixon would have been perfect as the I back. I mean, he's just an old school I formation running back, in my opinion. I always thought he ran better downhill than he ran from the shotgun too, to be quite frank. But that's not their style. And so I think they have running backs that fit them better at the moment.
What about defensive line?
I think it's better. And listen, I say that with all deference to DJ Reader and what he meant, but DJ Reader wasn't a great pass rusher. He got some push in the pocket, but he's not, I mean, he was what he was. He was a run stopper that everybody respected that job, and he did that job, and it doesn't show up in the stats. But you've gotten younger, more athletic, and you've gotten multiple bodies now at that. Adding Sheldon Rankins, who's not younger, but he's a proven pass rusher inside. Chris Jenkins, and then McKinley Jackson kind of fills the DJ Reader role. So I say better, your ends, you know what you got in your ends. And I think Sam Hubbard, to his credit, playing through the injury he played through, and the stats don't lie with how much he struggled over the last 7 or 8 games as he dealt with that ankle injury. Now that he's 100%, and the way Miles Murphy came on, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in the second year. So you've now got, honestly, Rick, I think you've got a real rotational system that you can use at that defensive line spot this year.
Both Paul and Mo mentioned Miles Murphy as the most likely breakout candidate on the defense. Do you agree with that?
I do, because I think they're going to put him in more pass rush situations. I think you're going to either see Sam Hubbard get off the field a little bit more and give him more of a blow, which means Miles will be on the field for more regular snaps. But I also think if you got, you can kick Sam inside to give yourself a real NASCAR speed pass rush group with Murphy and Hendrickson on the edge, and then pick one of the tackles to join Sam inside, or they've used Sam sometimes to drop and spy, and you've blitz guys. I mean, I just think it makes you more versatile. So yeah, I think Miles has a chance to be a breakout player, because I thought he really came on as last year progressed.
And I'm pretty certain of your answer to this one, but I'm also kind of interested to hear you break it down a little bit. What about the secondary?
That's a good question. Overall, because if you include the safety group, it's a better group. There's no doubt. Listen, we all talk about this. I get what they tried to do last year, and I do think they still were floored that Von Bell left. I don't think they were prepared for that. They were clearly prepared for Jesse leaving. They prepared for that a year early by drafting Dax Hill, and we'll never probably know how would Dax Hill have matured last year and learned and gotten better with Von Bell next to him, as opposed to Nick Scott, who wasn't very good, A, and then B, also was new to the system. So you had two guys completely new, with Dax playing a new position because he didn't play it the year before much because Von and Jesse played so much. You had two guys learning on the fly together, and that was a real difficult spot. And now you've got Von back in the system. Yeah, you got a new guy in Geno Stone, but at least you got Von back there to play alongside Geno Stone, to teach Jordan Battle some things about being a pro and about his position. And so I do think, and I think, at the corner spot, another year with DJ Turner with some experience, and now with some competition with Dax Hill and Cam Tillibert, I think has proven to be a quality NFL cornerback. I think you are better in the secondary overall.
All right. Obviously, we'll talk more about all the position groups and all that stuff as we get closer to training camp and that. But listen to their segment, it kind of brought up some things that had just happened that I wanted to get your take on there. I thought that was good stuff.
I did not hear their answer to that. What was their answer to the secondary?
I think they went corners and safeties. I think they split them up, maybe, and didn't talk about them all at once. But yeah, I think they. The difference too was they were choosing between the 2022, 2023, and 2024, and doing run passer beat between those 3 years. So
I was going to say the 2022 group was superb because you had Von and Jesse at the safeties, you had Cheeto at the height of being Cheeto. I mean, that group was clearly best. Yeah,
so I think it went run, pass on 2024, and boot 2023 there.
Correct. That's about right. That would be how I would rate them.
Yeah. Tyler Boyd signed with the Tennessee Titans this week. Of course, Brian Callahan is the new head coach there, and the Bengals will play at Tennessee this upcoming season. So they're going to have to see their former teammate and offensive coordinator at some point this season, Skinny.
Yeah, good for Tyler. I mean, and being with a familiar face probably doesn't hurt. Same for Callie, because he knows what Tyler can, and honestly, at this point of his career, can't do. There just isn't a lot of explosiveness anymore. But I think it's a serviceable pro who will be. He's not going to put crazy gaudy numbers up, in my opinion. He'll probably be in the 50 catch range for 580 yards, but give them the value that they're looking for. So I think it's a win-win for both.
Also, coming up, the NFL schedule release is next Wednesday at 8 p.m. We'll be talking about that on next week's show. Any predictions there? How many primetime games are you expecting? Yeah,
I initially thought 4, but I'm now leaning towards 3 with, again, the potential to flex into a couple. They've got some really good potential primetime opponents. Obviously Kansas City, the Eagles, any of the division games you want to choose. But there's a lot of really good primetime candidates in the NFL this year. I'm crossing my fingers that we don't get one of the 2 Christmas Day games, because don't forget there's 2 games on Christmas Day this year, even though Christmas is on a Wednesday. I'll be interested to see what happens with the Black Friday game, because remember last year they lobbied to get that game. It was given to New York first time through to see how it went. Maybe they get that one. I don't think they're going to get the Carolina game in Germany. I just don't. The NFL the last few years, other than games involving Jacksonville, because Jacksonville's played a couple of games a year in international cities. They've literally matched up like conference opponents, with the Bengals being AFC, Carolina being NFC. I don't see that taking place. But there's still a lot of interest and intrigue in the schedule because, don't forget, a lot of this just isn't the prime times get all their ways. I mean, CBS gets to protect some games along the way, the AFC games that they covet. Fox gets to do their. I mean, there's a lot of machinations here. And I think that's why the schedule was delayed. I think initially it was, the initial date the last few years has been the second Thursday in May, which is today as we're doing this podcast. Obviously, it was announced that it's going to come out next Wednesday. And I do think there's still networks fighting over what games they're going to be able to get and protect.
Well, they also have to get all the Pee Wee football games scheduled nationwide and everything else before they get down to the Thursday night football games. Then they'll select those because those are always the worst possible matchups you could ever come up with in the history of football.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, do you think the Cowboys maybe that could be a primetime game?
It could be Thanksgiving Day for all I know.
Or, I tell you what, the Black Friday game, you bringing that up, I think that's an interesting point because the Bengals really wanted that last year. And I don't know that many teams did. If the NFL knows they have a team that's willing and interested in participating, you would think that might be where they're looking to first.
Yeah, I would be disappointed if they get that game, though. And here's why. I mean, this is such a great high school football area. That's, state either semifinals or finals weeks for teams in the area. And I don't know. I overshadowing that to me just seems arrogant and selfish. I don't know. I get why they want to do it in a way, but at the same time, in such a great high school football area, why?
I'm going to say Steelers, Chiefs, Eagles, Cowboys. Those are the 4 primetime games.
Fair point. Yeah, fair point. Don't forget there's probably some Saturday games that are going to be mixed in around the holidays, which were last year. The Bengals played a couple of those games, one against the Vikings, one against the Steelers. Those are all on the table, but yeah, I mean, they could get flexed into, up to 6 primetime games when all said and done.
Yeah. I think that's the most you can have is 6,
yes.
Right? That was the most that anyone's had last year as well. I think the Chiefs had 6 and maybe somebody else last year got that many.
I think the Chiefs last year played 1 o'clock game. I believe all year, which is
that's
just
crazy.
It is.
Imagine being a beat writer for their team.
Oh,
brutal. All right, this is actually an Ask Anything question, but it's Bengals related. I'll ask it to you now. If we sent the Bengals PR team some extra microphones for the local reporters to use during press conferences so we can hear the questions being asked, do you think they would actually use them?
No, because again, you've been in enough of these settings. I mean, the questions are spontaneous. It's not like
the Bengals are the only ones who doesn't do that.
What's that?
Everyone, like every other press room I go into, we do have to pass around a microphone. Why don't the Bengals do that?
I hate that. I don't know. I hate that. I think
I agree. I don't like waiting for it in Xavier's media room, but we do have to sit there and pass it around.
Well, okay. So how many people are at a Xavier post game press conference?
Definitely fewer. I mean, not many.
I think that's the thing. I mean, that room that we're in is pretty big. I mean,
yeah, but can't they get like just a couple overhead mics to where they can modulate them up or something? I mean, this is the NFL. They have money coming out their ears. They can't figure out what they can spend all their money on. They can't get a press room mic'd. That seems pretty 1980-ish to me.
I would say you could probably get a couple of overhead mics that would disperse their way out that could probably pick up the. I know that's frustrating. Hey,
I mean, the St. Pius Choir was doing that back in the 90s when I went to school there. I'm pretty sure it can be done.
Yeah, I will tell you. I mean, there's been a couple of press conferences I haven't been able to go to. Some of the people on the beat, you got, something will come up and you got a dentist appointment, but we always try to share transcription of that stuff to where I'll get it off their feed and say, I'll do the first 4 minutes of it, blah, blah, blah. But 90% of the times I'll go, no idea what the question was. And then I'll put the answer. I go, I think I heard this. Here's the answer. And then I'll let them try to fill in the blanks to those questions. So I understand people's frustration because I've been through it myself.
Yeah. I mean, it just, especially when you are using all this stuff for social media purposes, for that to no one to be able to hear the questions is pretty,
Yeah, I would say this. I do not want to do pass the mic around thing. I hate that. But
I'm with you on that. It is annoying.
On the mics above, I get you.
Yeah, it feels like they could figure out an easy enough way to do that, though. All right, anything else on the Bengals, Skinny?
No, I did ask Joe Burrow and a couple of players about the concept of the 18-game schedule. And I thought Joe had kind of like Joe's answer. I don't think this part would ever come about. But he did make a point of, hey, right now, if you play 18 games and don't have a second bye, I asked him and Ted Karras because he's the Bengals player rep, and Mike Hilton because he's one of the more veteran guys, and all of them talked about without 2 bye weeks, this is completely a non-starter. And Burrow came up with the concept of, maybe that second bye week, we take them when we normally do, and then we all take one together. And I went, that's actually not a bad idea. And you kind of treat that like the NBA All-Star week or the Pro Bowl week. I'm like, no, I think you just take that as just a week off. But I do like the idea of everybody gets their normal bye week as it is. Like some get it in week 4, week 5, whatever it is. and then everybody maybe takes one in week 13, whatever that might be.
Don't you think that's a non-starter for the NFL, though? I mean, don't you think they won't shut down their league for a week?
Well, don't forget, this is going to be collectively bargained, and so if you want that, the players are going to want something in return. So
I mean, you are making a ton of extra money adding another week to your season. Is there an interesting week where it lines up with like college football playoffs where you can take a week off then?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rick. I don't think you would do it quite that late. I would think it would be sometime if you were to do it as a group, like mid-November-ish.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wouldn't be Thanksgiving week because we have that tradition, but maybe the week before Thanksgiving, which then allows everybody that's playing on Thanksgiving Day. It's no longer a short week for some of those teams. It is, you're coming off a bye anyway, and you go play the Thursday. So maybe it's that week. There's a lot of hoops to still be jumped through for this to even come to fruition. I think it's coming. It's coming at some point.
I just fixed it. Everyone has to play a Thanksgiving Day game, and then they get the next week off.
Ooh, I'd love that. That would be awesome.
You all play on Thursday, and then you fly straight home. You spend the whole weekend with your family, and you get a week off.
I like that.
That'd be incredible.
That ain't bad.
No, it'd be incredible for the players. Now, from a broadcast perspective, I'm sure they wouldn't like it as much. But could you imagine if we just had nothing but games and gambling all day Thursday on Thanksgiving?
Wow.
It would turn into the best holiday you could ever think of.
Turkey stuffing, wine, and gambling and football. What a tradition.
I mean, that's already what we do. But if you could just blow it out and have a full like Sunday slate of games.
I'm kind of digging that.
Yeah, my brain's working overtime today. All right, let's finish this up with a little college basketball. One topic to get to here as Xavier added their 6th transfer of the offseason on Wednesday, and it was a name familiar to local fans in Cameron Fletcher. Fletcher, of course, started his career at Kentucky in the 2020-21 season. That was the COVID year. Then he transferred to Florida State. He played for the Seminoles the last 3 years, but blew out the same knee each of the last 2 seasons, limiting him to just 17 games combined in those 2 years. Skinny, were you surprised to see Cam Fletcher's name pop back up?
So here, you want to know what's funny about that? So when I saw that was taken, because I texted you yesterday about, the podcast time and all that stuff, and you said, hey, I'm waiting for Xavier to get a commitment. So I started snooping around and saw that that's who it was. And I started reading it. I'm like, oh, yeah, he was in Kentucky. Totally forgot about that. Huh. How about that? That guy.
You know, what's funny? We were actually trying to remember him on a podcast a handful of months ago. We were talking about when Cal was getting silly at different times. And we talked about how things changed around COVID. And I said, remember there was a player that he kicked off his team and we weren't sure if he was going to come back. It was Cameron Fletcher.
Yep.
That was the guy. He kicked off his team at Christmas. He was gone for the team for a few weeks and then he came back and then he transferred after the freshman year. But that's the guy that we were trying to remember. He is now a Xavier Musketeer.
Obviously there's the potential upside, right? That if he's healthy, can give you minutes. I don't think he's going to be a 30-minute guy. But again, if we're dealing with Jerome Hunter coming back and him, dealing with knee issues, if you could get 18 to 20 minutes from those guys, I think that's a win, right?
So here's the thing that I think is actually interesting about this. I don't think Xavier has much intention on him being an impact or a big factor this year. Now, maybe he will be at some point, especially as you get into Big East play second half of the year. But with him coming off that second knee injury, the same knee, I guess the surgery was screwed up the first time. It wasn't properly fixed. So he's still rehabbing. He's not going to be cleared to play until like October or right around the beginning of the season. I think they're going to take their time, make sure he's way overcautious, way over rehabbed on this thing, and 110% before he really gets back into action. And so the way they're looking at this is he still has, because he had the COVID year that first year, and now he's had back-to-back redshirt seasons with the knee. He would probably need a waiver for the second one, but you'd get it in today's NCAA climate. He has 3 years of eligibility left after being in school for 4 years already. So he's not – next year I'd look at as a developmental year. Jerome Hunter's obviously trying to play. Maybe they can platoon like you're talking about in that backup forward role. But then Jerome Hunter's going to be gone. And that following 2025-26 season, Xavier has 7 of their current 12 guys on the roster set to leave after next year. So they're going to be rebuilding that whole roster again. I think that was a big part of bringing in Cam Fletcher is roster stability for 2025, 2026, having a bona fide 6'7", 220-pound forward there.
That plan sounds perfect, right? Until somebody else comes calling with NIL again. That's the goofy part about this.
Yeah, and that's the case too. People are asking me like, well, what keeps him here next year? I was like, well, Nothing. Yeah, I mean, that's the way.
Other than him just saying, hey, Xavier did me a solid. I got some NIL money to rehab. They did right by me. I'm going to do right by them. And I still need to show people I can play, for goodness sake. So maybe it is a perfect storm that works out. But it is funny anymore because everybody now starts looking at it going, what about 2025? Don't even worry. Honestly, stop worrying about anything in the future. Just worry about the now because that's all that matters.
I completely agree with you. And that's the way I have approached it pretty much this entire time. Like, quit worrying about how many years of eligibility or what have you, or if you're going to have to rebuild your roster next year in the transfer portal, because everyone is. That's the way it works now. But I also think Sean Miller and his staff are being smart here, saying, look, we're not going to fill all 13 scholarships with guys we expect to play right away because it's just not feasible. You have to pay them too much NIL money, and none of them are going to stay happy anyway, so they'll transfer regardless of what happens. But going with those last few spots and saying, here's a guy that's coming off 2 ACL surgeries who maybe wants to sit out for a year in rehab. We've got the spot and the money for him. And I think they're looking to do that maybe with their last available scholarship too. They actually had another guard on campus yesterday, and they're looking to close on that. So that, I think, is really maybe a new wave here of recruiting, is with those final scholarships here in this transfer portal NIL era. Maybe you try to get creative with that and look towards the future with them.
Yeah, because I mean, you're rarely going to get a guy who wants to come be the 11th or 12th guy. He's not going to get much NIL money anyway, and if he thinks he can play, he's going to try to find a spot that he can play.
Right.
And I think I think Mark Pope's in a little bit of that. I mean, he got a little bit lucky with the kid from South Carolina kid. I brought a complete blank. Noah.
Trent, is it?
Yeah, Noah Trent. Thank you.
Yeah, Trent Noah.
Trent Noah. Yeah, Trent Noah. So that's a kid who's a Kentucky kid. Obviously he was committed to South Carolina, but pulled out of that commitment. So he's going to come to Kentucky. So you got now on that back end of the bench, you got 2 developmental kids from Kentucky in him and Perry. And you've got the Colin Shepard kid, or whatever the hell his name is, the Colin Chandler kid who was on the Mormon mission. That's kind of how you got to feel like your roster, right? Of those developmental guys who aren't quite there from an NIL perspective, who haven't quite proven themselves, who maybe are in-state kids in Kentucky's case. That works out perfect because you're not getting 10 deep of NIL guys or of transfer portal guys. You're just not.
Right. And whether it be the type of guys you're talking about, or maybe just incoming freshmen that look like diamond in the rough project type guys. I think you're going to see more teams taking swings on those high upside guys, the high ceiling, but also maybe lower floor type guys with those last scholarship spots than you have in years past. Maybe the idea of taking a quote unquote college ready player who's an underclassman now makes no sense. Like the guy, right. I mean, especially when we're saying college ready, meaning he can rebound or defend, but he doesn't have a lot of upside. You know, I mean, the 5 stars, obviously they play at any level, but it's going to be interesting to see how coaches continue to evolve as the landscape of the sport changes. All right, let's move on to Ask Skinny Anything. We'll start off with some NBA playoffs talk. Skinny, who are you taking to win the NBA playoffs?
If you'd asked me this a week ago, I would have stuck with Denver. But man, Minnesota looks like a train. But I'm gonna go to the East, where I think Boston comes out of the East more refreshed than anybody out of the West.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I know they never seem to actually win it when they're supposed to, but I'm going to ahead and sticking with Boston as well. Austin
I will say Minnesota looks great. I mean, to go do what they did the first 2 games at Denver was really impressive, and I don't think it's a shock because of how good Denver is, but it's also not a shock if you watch Minnesota this year. They're good.
Yeah, Minnesota has been really fun to watch. I love watching them defensively.
And Rick, the other thing too, and I hope you agree with this, I don't know why it's the case, but when the Knicks are relevant, it's pretty cool. I mean, I love the Garden. I love those Pacers-Knicks rivalries of the 90s with Reggie Miller and Ewing and those guys going at it. And that's what it feels like we got going right now.
That was the next words out of my mouth. Is the other thing that's been super fun to watch has been this Knicks team. I love watching Jalen Brunson. I love Josh Hart. I love him going over to Reggie Miller during the broadcast and saying, hey, they're chanting F you if you couldn't hear. I mean, like, just, it's fun. The Knicks are fun. Their fan base is fun. The Knicks Pacers thing is fun. I love all of that. So, yeah, it's been good. Another NBA question here. Austin Rivers recently said, I think this is on the Pat McAfee show, but it was definitely on a podcast of some sort, said, I can take 30 players right now in the NBA and throw them in the NFL. You cannot take 30 NFL players and put them in the NBA. Do you agree or disagree with Austin Rivers?
I think I'd probably agree with him. I agree with the overall sentiment.
I don't know if it's like exactly 30. I don't know what the number is of guys that could make the crossover, but I do think the sentiment of NBA guys can play in the NFL.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah,
NFL guys can play in the NBA.
Yeah, I can't give you a number, Rick, but yeah, right. I think more guys can make that conversion than could make the other conversion.
Right. And I mean, it's just a logistical thing. One, there's way more specialization in the NFL. You've got 11 guys on the field at a time. You can hide one guy easier than you can on a basketball court where all 5 guys have to be able to do everything to some extent. Like taking a 6'8" super athlete and put him at tight end or receiver for a red zone threat is much easier than trying to hide like a random NFL player who can't guard a ball screen, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't say this, and I think we all. LeBron James would be a ridiculous NFL tight end. Hell, he might even be a ridiculous NFL wide receiver.
Yes, right now. I mean, I think you could play him right now and he'd still be that good at the end of his career. Yeah, I've always felt that way, but I do. Here's the other thing about it, Skinny. NBA guys, you like the starting point is 6'5 plus, 6'6 plus. Aren't a lot of those in the NFL.
No, I mean, we're looking at it. It's funny because I did a story last week talking to Orlando Brown about mostly about Amarius Mims, but he talked about how he feels like the shortest guy in the room now with Trent Brown and Amarius Mims in there. And those guys are both 6'7", and actually technically Orlando is actually 6'7" as well. And those are giants by NFL standards, and they're hulking men well over 300 pounds. 6'7" anymore is it? Hell, Kristaps Porzingis is a 7'2" two guard, for Christ's sakes. I mean, 6'7"
is a wing in the NBA, and these guys are 350 pounds at 6'7". So it's like, I mean, there's no chance.
I'm not here to tell you Deuce McBride of the Knicks could do it, but he was a hell of a high school football player at Moeller, and he wasn't, playing chopped liver. Deuce McBride is jacked. I mean, that's the other thing. Some of these NBA guys you don't think of as jacked until you're up next close to them. You're like, wow, that dude is huge.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the reality of it. Also, like, to some extent, football is a less skilled sport than basketball. You have to have the hand-eye coordination of being able to put the ball in the basket, dribble, pass, all those things at a really extremely high level in the NBA. In the NFL, if you are just the 0.1% athlete, you might still be functional and be able to help a team without being all that skilled.
No question.
Yeah. All right. Who is the funniest Bengals player Skinny has ever met?
Funniest. That's a good one. Jamar tries to be, and I think at times Jamar is. There's also times where it falls flat.
Pac-Man's pretty funny. He was.
Pac-Man was funny when he didn't. I mean, honestly, the rant in Cleveland's still the greatest of all times.
Garbage.
And Pac-Man could also be really funny, but he was so bipolar that you just didn't know which one you were getting. But he could be. I think he's the one of those guys that could be funny without knowing he was being funny.
Yeah, he was unintentional.
Going, you're nutty funny. But he'd be up there.
Yeah. Chad Johnson has got to be. I know you get tired of him way more.
Yeah, because I don't need an act. I just like genuinely funny to me is funny. I don't need your act to try to be funny.
That's fair. I still think I thought he was genuinely funny too. Maybe even more so in the more subdued version of Chad, where he wasn't doing the act and he wasn't on. I think he was still pretty humorous. Any other guys that stand out as comedy?
No, because I think most of these guys, honestly, they're just so tunnel vision, and I get it, man. They're just so regimented with everything that when you're talking to them a lot, it's literally just ask me your questions, get out of my face, and let me get on with my day. And I get it.
Joe Burrow's press conferences with you guys are just absolutely humorless. Just humorless. I like him. I mean, I think he's probably a fine guy, but I mean, the press conferences you guys have with him are hilarious. I mean, you would think he's talking about like, I don't know, some type of science that I wouldn't understand.
Yes.
Yeah. Which Cincinnati sports personality do you think would throw the best party?
Ooh. Well, Tyler Boyd's gone. For some reason, I think Tyler Boyd would know how to throw a party.
Who's the richest? I mean, that we should be asked like owners, right? Probably owner throws the best party.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. Those feel like they'd be stuffed shirty, right? Where you got little finger sandwiches and little hors d'oeuvres and craft cocktails. Oh, I like a craft cocktail. I'm not going to lie to you. But you know what I'm saying.
I get it.
I don't think of those as parties per se.
Fair. Fair.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like the Castellinis know how to party a little bit.
Well, Phil.
Based on their rumored extracurriculars.
Let's go with Phil. and then when Phil gets in the sauce, then we can ask him questions and have him give goofy answers. And really the truth comes out at that point. It's like truth serum.
Yeah. Yeah, where's Seho at when you need him? Get him back.
Exactly.
All right. Please rank. This is from our guy Mo. We'll wrap it up with this. Please rank the following careers, and I've sent these to you ahead of time. I'll read them off real quickly. Delaney Rudd, Paul Bako, Dixie Carter, Milt Thompson, Daniel Sepulveda, Pat Pacillo,
Pat
Pacillo, Harvey Smilovitz, Chris Gent, Armigas Spearman, and Kurt Nymphius.
One of the great Arizonas. By the way, Kurt Nymphius played at Arizona State at a time where they had like 5 NBA players and could barely make the NCAA tournament. It always made me crazy. They had Fat Lever and Byron Scott and Kurt Nymphius. I mean, and they barely made
if you waste Fat Lever's career without an NCAA tournament, you should be gone.
No question. I agree with that. So it shouldn't shock you to know that I knew all these people off the top of my head, but I did have to do some research for this. So I got, for full disclosure, you gave this to me ahead of time, but I did know them all. So I will proceed to rank them 10-1 with some facts to go along with it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I hate to do it to my guy, Harvey Smilovitz, because he was a former Local 12 sports anchor who actually once, I don't think he knew it was my daughter, but the school that she went to actually pitched the story because she was playing high school golf as like a fifth grader. And they pitched the story. Harvey did a very, very nice story on her. We still have it saved on a DVD. It was very smart.
You put him last? What the hell? This guy did a nice thing for you.
He did, but he's out of the sportscasting game, and he's now a loan officer in Maryland. So, I mean, that's
not a great career then, I guess, in terms of the sportscasting career.
Or to Harvey's credit, maybe it's a greater career because he's out of this crazy business.
Smart. Yeah, he's a smart guy. But I always liked Harley Smilovitz. Those one of the few names on here I recognize.
I do as well.
All right.
But again, some of these other people, even though they had crappy careers, some of them, they also made it to like the ultimate level. So for like a guy like Harvey, you know, you would think the ultimate level would be an ESPN, right? So that's why I had to put him at the bottom. It just he was.
What's bigger than WLWT Sports?
It was WKRC TV. He was one of Local 12's finest.
Was he really? I thought he was a Channel 5 guy.
No, he was one of ours. I liked Harvey. Good dude. But he goes last. Number 9 is Chris Gent. Played at Ohio State. Was a pretty good player. Not a great player, but pretty good. But played all of 6 career NBA games, Rick. But he got to the NBA, so that's why I got to rank him ahead of Harvey.
Why the hell did Mo have Chris Gent on this list, by the way?
Why does he have half of these names on this list?
That's a good point, too. But Chris Gent, like, I know that name, but there's like nothing. There's nothing interesting about Chris Gent that I know of.
Fair point. Number 8, Pat Basillo, who was one of those former Reds first-round draft pick pitchers who never panned out. Did appear in 18 games with 7 starts. Went 4-3 with a 5.90 career ERA.
What era was this? I've never heard that name in my life.
87, 88.
Okay, so when I was born.
He pitched at Seton Hall for college.
Right.
So there you go. All right, next is Armiga Spearman, who played 23 career games for the Bengals. He somehow started 11 games at middle linebacker in 2000 as an undrafted rookie free agent signee out of Ole Miss. And it's no surprise that team went 4-12.
I remember Armiga Spearman.
I do too. I remember all these people, like I told you.
Yeah.
Number 6, Delaney Rudd, known more to me as he was on a lot of those early ESPN games in like the mid 80s.
I don't mean this the wrong way, but Delaney Rudd is a guy?
Delaney Rudd's a guy. Played 239 career NBA games, averaged only 3.9 points per game. But he comes in at number 6. Number 5, Daniel Sepulveda. 52 career games with the Steelers as a punter from 2007 to 11. But again, 52 career games in the NFL. That's pretty good, in my opinion.
Wait, he played in 2011 and I didn't know who he was? I had never heard that name.
He was a punter. Yeah, I think he played only like 6 or 7 games that season. The first 3 years to that, he played in a bunch of games.
Wow.
Next is Paul Bacco, career platoon backup catcher, played with 11 different teams from 1998 to 2009, including the Reds in 2008 when he slashed a meager 217, 299, 327 with 6 homers and 35 RBIs. He did have 508 career hits. He comes in at number 4 on the list. Number 3, Kurt Nymphius, who I mentioned earlier, center power forward with Dallas, the Clippers, the Spurs, the Pistons, and Philly. Played 564 career games, averaged 6.4 points and 4.4 rebounds per game.
When did his career end?
His career ended in the 90s.
Okay.
Early 90s. Next comes Milt Thompson. I put Milt number 2 on this list. Yeah, Milt was a solid pro. He finished with a career OPS of 708, had 1,029 career hits, 214 career stolen bases, played mostly with the Phillies and the Cardinals, but also played with Atlanta, Houston, the Dodgers, and the Rockies. How about this little nugget I dug up on Milt Thompson? He finished 17th in MVP voting in both 1987 and 1989, and he started in the outfield for the Phillies in 1993. I believe the World Series that Joe Carter won with that home run for Toronto.
I'm happy to see Mo giving Milt the proper respect here.
I hope he does. I hope he agrees with where I ranked Milt. And number 1 is Dixie Carter. Do you have any idea who Dixie Carter is before I give you her background?
No clue. I'm Googling her as we speak.
Accomplished actress, best known for her role in Designing Women, Rick. Do you remember that show at all? Probably not.
I certainly don't.
She was nominated for a 2007 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Comedy Series for her role on Desperate Housewives, and also worked on Broadway. That's a clear number 1 on this list. Am I not wrong?
Yeah, she's number 1.
Okay.
Also, she had her prime years for sure.
Oh, yeah, no question.
Yeah.
And married to a very accomplished actor, Hal Holbrook.
I assume that's the man who looks like he's 175 years old in this picture.
That is correct. Did
Or
you ever
she's
watch
dead, by the way. She died at 70.
Yes, she did. Correct.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch the Fletch movies?
No.
Okay. Well, Hal Holbrook played the bad guy in the second Fletch movie. He also played. So, did you ever watch the Dirty Harry movies?
No, but I know what that is.
Well, there's one of them where Hal Holbrook plays a guy who leads a bunch of vigilante cops, young cops, motorcycle cops, and has them kill criminals out on the street. Just, walk up to a random pimp and shoot him and all that stuff. And Harry finally got wind of it. It's a great final scene where Harry kills him finally.
He died in 2021, just recently.
Yeah, just recently. He was a very well thought of actor for sure.
Yeah.
So there's your list.
That's the list. That's all we got.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mo. I hope you agree with the way I ranked them, by the way. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back next week. We'll have some Bengals scheduled to talk about as well. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Mason.
Thanks for checking out Local 12's YouTube channel. Click the links and hit subscribe so you can be notified anytime we post new stories.